The Galaxy Z Fold 5 is Samsung's latest folding phone, and at first glance, it's easy to point out its flaws. It's expensive, it has an obvious crease, and battery life has always been a concern. However, I still like this phone a lot because it provides a unique set of capabilities that I think a lot of people will find very valuable. And you'll probably be surprised just how good the battery life is now with the new SoC. The one thing that the Z Fold 5 does better than any other phone is how much more productive you can be with it while on the go. Like when you're sitting in an Uber, a train, or just kind of sitting around waiting for something. Situations where it might be a little bit too extra to pull out a laptop. But the Z Fold 5, with its 7.6-inch inner screen, can enable you to do a lot more than even a plus-size regular phone. For example, I think it's dramatically more comfortable to read books or documents on this. Oftentimes, documents are not optimized for mobile, but on this almost square 5x6 screen, the entire document can fit while still being readable. So you don't have to keep scrolling side to side while reading. This inner screen is 2K with 337 pixels per inch, so it's pretty sharp. And it can also go up to 1750 nits peak brightness, so even if you're sitting in the sun, you'll probably still be able to see everything. Also, it's a 120Hz screen, so it's a very smooth experience no matter what you're doing. The bezels are very thin too, but there is a necessary lip that sticks out. There's also an under-screen camera that's supposed to be invisible, but in all situations, you can still very much see it. These are just minor downsides though. Overall, I find that with the Z Fold 5, it's much easier to be productive, and so in my downtimes, I tend to be more productive with this rather than just scrolling through TikTok. But this more square aspect ratio does have its own drawbacks. Watching movies on it is probably a bit less impressive than you would imagine, especially the ones with the super wide aspect ratio. For many YouTube videos that are 16:9 or 2:1, on the Z Fold it's only slightly larger than on the S23 Ultra. But for wider movies that are 2.39:1, it'll actually be smaller than on the S23 Ultra. However, it's not just the larger size of the inner screen that helps. The Fold 5 actually runs the same One UI version as Samsung tablets, so some apps have a different, more productive layout compared to on a regular phone. For example, in Gmail, I can have an email open on one side while scrolling through the rest of my inbox. Also, Chrome shows the tabs just like on a desktop, which makes switching between them much faster. You can even have something open in a new window, which makes it automatically split screen with 2 Chrome windows. But you can actually go up to 3 apps in the split screen view, and many apps like Chrome and Samsung Notes supports having more than one instance opened. And you can save a split screen configuration to quickly launch everything simultaneously. Another feature that's not on regular Samsung phones is a taskbar, where you can add in most used apps, and recent apps will show up here as well. This really helps to make using the Z Fold feel more similar to a desktop. It's very fast to switch between apps and open up things side by side. So multitasking is very easy on this phone, and you can even make a PNG cutout of a thing in the photo gallery and then drop it directly into any note-taking app. This phone also has DeX, which gives you a desktop experience when connected to an external display. By default, there are some limitations, but you can use the Multistar app from Goodlock to enable 4K display resolution and also have an unlimited number of apps opened, which this phone is definitely fast enough to support. However, unlike the tablets, the Z Fold cannot run DeX on its own, which I think would have been cool for the inner screen. Also, unlike the tablets, which do not support themes, customization on the Fold is the same as on any other Samsung phone, but this is the only phone with a split keyboard by default, and I do think it helps to make typing easier. Now, what I think makes it really stand out for productivity is support for the S Pen. There's actually this new type of case with an S Pen built in, and it doesn't really stick out. So now you're basically able to attach the S Pen to the Fold without adding any more bulk. However, this still isn't quite the same as having it built into the phone like on the S23 Ultra, mainly because this S Pen doesn't have Bluetooth. There is the S Pen Pro that has Bluetooth, which enables the air actions, but I don't really find those very useful aside from the remote shutter button. And even without Bluetooth, this S Pen's button still works. So you can hold it down to erase, which is very convenient. You can even set a shortcut to open up any app when double tapping the screen while holding the button. And this is done through the Pentastic app from Goodlock. Another thing is that this new S Pen that comes with the case no longer has a retracting tip, unlike the last generation. But the last gen tip only retracted at very, very high pressure. I really could not see anyone writing with that much force. So not having a retracting tip will likely make no difference. The Fold's inner screen is tough enough to handle normal writing pressure. And it does feel great to write on the Fold. The larger and more square inner screen means that you don't have to constantly scroll while writing. It's great for annotating some documents, making sketches, or drawing diagrams. It's definitely a better experience than trying to write on the S23 Ultra's much narrower screen. There are great apps for this on Android, like GoodNotes, which is cross-platform, so you can access it on Apple and Windows devices as well. But Samsung Notes is really good too. It has great tools, and you can seamlessly mix between typing and drawing. And although the Fold's inner screen screen is not glass, writing on it feels pretty similar to glass, most likely because the S Pen has a soft nib. The biggest difference is that you can definitely feel the crease when writing over it. It's not deep enough to ruin your handwriting though, and when looking at it front on, the crease isn't even that noticeable. But it also isn't much reduced from last year, so when you're looking at it from an angle or if there's some reflection, the crease can definitely still be somewhat distracting. However, this plastic screen does track more fingerprints, and it also tends to feel warmer than glass. So the pen, the screen, and the software all work together to make this phone a great productivity device, as good as a small tablet of this size can be. But the whole point of the Fold is the ability to always have it with you, and when it's folded, it's one thick phone, but it's actually less wide than the S23 Ultra. It's also not too heavy at 253 grams, so the Z Fold doesn't feel any less convenient to carry around than any other large phone, and the narrowness actually helps it fit more easily into my pockets. And this year, it's got a new hinge, which helps it close fully. Aesthetically, this looks nicer, but also it can better prevent dust from getting inside the crack, although it's still rated at the same IPX8 as last year with no dust resistance rating, but you should be able to submerge it for short durations. When this phone is folded, it feels almost normal. The outer screen is very usable at 6.2 inches, but its aspect ratio is 23.1 by 9, so it's way more narrow than a regular phone. It's still perfectly fine for things like text replies or checking some notifications, and especially if you want to type with one hand, the narrowness is actually a benefit here. Also, Samsung software for transitioning between the inner and outer screen works great. You can seamlessly transition to and from either screen. Just note that the smaller outer screen runs the same One UI as regular Samsung phones, so you do lose the taskbar there. This outer screen is also quite sharp at around 2K resolution. It's 120Hz and it can also hit 1750 nits. It's made from Gorilla Glass Victus 2, so the same as on other Samsung flagship phones. The back is matte glass and it feels pretty nice. The side and the hinge are aluminum, and there's a fingerprint scanner on the power button. I have the hero color here, the icy blue, which I think looks really nice. The other black and cream look great as well, and the side aluminum does match the color. Overall, the Fold's build is very solid. The hinge can hold pretty much any angle, and it's designed such that it's impossible to catch your finger in it. This phone feels pretty comfortable in the hand. Also, there's a hole punch selfie lens on the outer screen, but honestly, you can just flip it open and use the main cameras. The hardware for those is about on par with the S23's main cameras, which is a shame for a phone that's this expensive. Even using the main sensor from last year's S22 Ultra would have been a nice upgrade. But because of its form factor, the Z Fold is still a really nice phone to take pictures with. First of all, you can film yourself with the ultra-wide, the main lens, or even the telephoto. I think the ultra-wide is really useful for group photos. Or if you're taking pictures of other people, the preview on the outer screen can let them see the shot, which can be really nice. And the Z Fold can kinda act like its own tripod, just like the Z Flip, but it needs to be at an angle so you probably won't be able to see yourself anymore. And on the large inner screen, you can set it so that you immediately see some of the recent photos you've taken. I feel like the Fold's form factor has a lot of potential for photo and video related things, but right now, it's not fully realized due to the mid-tier hardware and also some software issues. One of the things that I found surprising is that you actually cannot take advantage of the main camera for high quality video calls. Only the main screen can be on when this phone is unfolded. There is a workaround to use the outer screen instead, but even then, all the meeting apps I tried actually will only use the ultra wide for some reason. But as for the photos and videos, they actually look really nice. You almost cannot tell any difference between it and the S23 Ultra in good lighting, and the iPhone's color is a little bit different, but quality-wise, it's pretty similar here as well. And the same goes for the ultra wide. Although it's using the older lens that has one set focus and cannot focus up close, in these shots, I can barely tell a difference between it and the other flagship phones. Also, in this ultra-wide selfie, the Fold with the preview makes it so that I can actually frame it, and this is the only one where I got my arm out of the way. The selfie on the outer screen is no match for the other phones, but you can just use the Fold's main camera. And the inner screen also has the under-screen camera. It looks so bad that it almost has a personality to it, and honestly looks kind of interesting. Another thing that can be considered a downside is that against the S23 Ultra, which is cheaper, the Fold also doesn't have a 10x telephoto lens, but its 3x telephoto lens is quite good. It's slightly less sharp than the iPhone 14 Pro Max's, but it's pretty similar in quality to the S23 Ultras. And when it comes to video, the Fold's quality does look a bit worse than the Ultra, and at nighttime, it's noisier than the other two phones. But still, if you're not zooming in, then it's really hard to tell a difference. However, there is this pretty ugly purple flare around the lights here on the main lens, which is pretty noticeable. But overall, I think the processing really carried the old hardware here, so it kept up with the other flagship phones in most situations. The noise level and quality actually kept up even at night. Given its very high price though, I don't think it's too much to ask for at least the same main sensor as on the S23 Ultra. However, the most surprising part of the Z Fold 5 is its battery life and performance. The now not so new 8 Gen 2 is still pretty good, and it beats the iPhone 14 Pro Max in 3D Mark. It's as fast as the S23 Ultra, but the thermals aren't as good as on the Ultra, because only half of the device really dissipates the heat. In my use though, gaming on it has been very smooth, and when the games are optimized for this more square aspect ratio, the large screen can really elevate the experience. Now, the battery life really surprised me. Even though it only has a 4,400 mAh battery and a bigger screen than the S23 Ultra, it actually kept up really well. For 1 hour of running a gaming benchmark, it only dropped 4% more than the S23 Ultra, and this is running on the bigger screen with brightness match at around 70%, which I think is definitely bright enough for most indoor use. And for video playback, after 3 hours of playing 4K videos, it actually did about as well as the S23 Ultra and the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Perhaps at a higher brightness level, the results might be worse. But still, this is some very impressive results. During my day-to-day use, I never really have to worry about its battery life, especially if I'm using it more often in this folded configuration. So overall, the price of the Fold is steep. But if you think of it as a phone and a tablet with 5G connection in one, it might make sense for those who are on the go a lot, especially considering its much improved battery life, the slimmer folded shape, and the S Pen case. It's now a very practical device to carry around and do work on. I really enjoy bringing this around with me and being able to read things much more comfortably on the go. The camera and the crease can definitely be better, but even as it is, I think it's a good refinement over last gen, and it really stands out for all of its unique capabilities. This video isn't sponsored, but if you're interested in purchasing the Fold, consider using my link down below to help support this channel. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Subscribe if you did. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram for more content, and you can watch more here.